All right, welcome back everyone to Jface Games. It's been a while. I've been working on my own RPG secretly. For those that don't know, I'm building an RPG. I've been doing it on this channel for a long time. And recently I've started working with Runehammer, and we've been pushing it along. Now that's a secret project. Let's get into Cosmere RPG here because that's what this video is about. For those that don't know, currently what was once the Stormlight RPG is now the Cosmere RPG, and it's up on Kickstarter crushing right now, so I'm sure everyone knows about it. But I wanted to go into the mechanics. I wanted to understand what was going on in the game. Full disclosure, I'm a huge Brandon Sanderson fan. I've read all of the Cosmere books, so now that it's the Cosmere, I love that. But I wanted to know, did it do anything interesting with its mechanics, or is it kind of a lot of, I'm just going to say safe mechanics, you know, from current games that are out, which is not a bad thing. I think that you can have very basic resolution system, very basic hit points, etc., and make a very basic scaffold for a game and just do interesting powers on top of that. And that would be wonderful. And knowing the Cosmere, there are some amazing powers in that system, right? The magic systems for Mistborn and the magic systems for Stormlight Archives in the books lend themselves to so much creative powers that you could have a very basic resolution system, very basic hit point pools, and have some amazing powers and still feel awesome. But let's talk about this game and some of the things it does. So resolution system, it uses a D20 rollover, and there's nothing really wild here. Plus attribute, plus skill, right? So it's very standard D20 in essence, right? You're rolling a D20, and you're then going to roll, you're going to add your attribute and add your skill. Super simple, right? I don't know if they call them attributes, but in essence, that's what you're doing. Then you have all your other stuff. You're going to, we'll get into some other things, but I think the other main thing here that is probably interesting that I'm going to put into the resolution system, because it is a part of the resolution system, is the plot die, right? Now, at first, I'll admit, when I saw the plot die, I didn't think it was that interesting. I thought, oh, here's a D6 you roll, and it's going to give you a yes, maybe, and a etc. It's going to add some circumstances to your roll. And at first, I thought, meh. But then I've looked into it, and I think that it's actually a little bit more elegant than I thought. So, in essence, in a lot of games, you'll have this concept of you succeed with consequence, or you fail with success, or these kind of things that are a little bit of a nuance, right? I think that Apocalypse World for me was a real introduction to that concept. So you can have and I think this game has some architecture from, or some of the designers that came from Genesis system, or the Star Wars system, that had that really embedded in its core. So the idea of the plot die is it's a D6, and it has two of the faces give opportunities, and then two faces give complications, right? Now, why do I think this is cool and unique or elegant is because the plot die is not rolled every time, right? There are a lot of games that they decide that they want their resolution system to have this, succeed with consequence, fail with, bonus embedded in their resolution. And I think that's exhausting, right? As a DM, I find that can be exhausting at times, where everything is either a success with confidence, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot. It's a lot. And so you're always having to think on your toes and always having to add stuff. The D6 plot die in this game, you only have to roll it when you're faced with an interesting sort of situation. So either the GM saying, oh, I think this is interesting, I want you to roll a plot die with it, or the player is coming up with something mechanically where they're like, oh, I want to do this. I'm going to try and jump over that and dive into that. And you're like, okay, roll the plot die with this. That's great. So it gives some of that RP element. If you're doing something more flashy or RP-esque, then you're going to roll a plot die. There's another reason to do that. So it's not overwhelming. You're not doing it all the time. And now you're rewarding-ish. You're giving a potential reward. And I'll say that it is a reward for when someone comes up with an RP idea. Now, why is it so much of a reward? Well, there's no critical rolls in this game, meaning that like, oh, if I roll a 20, it's a crit. No, rolling a 20 is just an automatic opportunity, because an opportunity is either like opportunity is either max damage, aid of ally, influence the narrative, or regain focus, which we'll talk about as a resource. So normally in a game, if I want to have one of these things happen for me bonus, I've got to get a critical roll. So D20, I got to get a 20, so 5% chance that's ever going to happen, right? Well, in this game, anytime I come up with a cool RP moment, I can then use the plot die, and I've got a 33% chance of this happening. So that's awesome, right? Like, that's pretty cool that if you come up with an awesome RP opportunity, your chance of then getting critical success is 33%. Now, the problem being that your chance of getting a complication is also 33%. And complication is just reverse of the above. However, I think it's important to note that the complication die, two sides of the complication, give bonuses, right? 4 and 2, +4, +2, which means that they don't ever, or they're trying to hedge their bets on you ever getting a fail with consequence, right? They want you to have success with consequences, or they want you to have fails with opportunities. Like, that's what they're leaning into, right? And so by doing something awesome, by coming up with something cool to do, you get a chance to roll the plot die. You've got a crazy higher chance of actually getting a critical success. And even if you have a complication, which is fun story-wise, you probably succeeded at whatever role you were doing. That's great. I think that has a lot more uniqueness in it than originally I thought when I saw the dice, right? So I love that. All right, ancestries, it's either human or singer, which I'm not going to go into the story and the lore of this game, so it's not relevant for what we're talking about here. Attributes, you've got 6 of them. You've got strength and speed, intellect, and hold please. You've got intellect and willpower. Then you have awareness and presence. And in essence, these are all really cool. So that's a silly thing to say. But in essence, what is happening is that they do a great job of sort of bunching these things together, right? So when you're starting a character, you get 12 points, and you can split up however with no more than 3 in a stat, right? So you can split them up however you want. Speed's going to determine your movement and quickness and those kind of things. This is going to determine your strength. I think most of us understand sort of the idea behind these. But the other thing they do, which is really cool, is that strength speed is also going to determine your hit points. Intellect, willpower is going to determine your focus. And these are resource pools. And this is going to determine your investiture. Which is this is like your magic power. This focus is an amazing resource that gets like a meta currency you're going to use all the time. And then hit points is obviously your ability to stay it up. But the other thing that they do, which is really nice, and this is just a character sheet thing, where if I were going to, let me pull this over. Each one of these things is just really nicely, cleanly paired, where you can see here that here's my strength. This is all my physical stuff. Here's my strength. Here's my speed. My defense, in essence, my physical defense, which is 10 plus those 2 stats. My health, which is actually my hit points. And then I'm going to have the skills that are associated with this, right? And so you can see each skill has a rank. And what you end up with is that your pluses is whatever your attribute is, plus your ranks. So then you have +4, right? So athletics, you have a 3, but you have 3 ranks in it, so that's 6, and so you have +6. Really simple, really smooth and simple. Now, each one of these has its own defense. You have a physical defense, a spiritual defense, and a cognitive defense, and different things are going to attack you, and what they're doing is they're trying to beat that, right? They're trying to roll over. So an enemy, if he's attacking you with a sword, they've got to get a 17 or higher because you've got a 16 defense. Now they've got their own pluses, etc. That kind of thing. So that's nice. I think that's nice and clean. Skills we've kind of already looked at here. There is one little sort of nuance difference, is that you have skills which are really nice, like really, really simple and clean. But I'll point out that heavy weapons are a skill and light weapons are a skill. So it's just these two big batches, right? So weapons are skills. And then skills all fit underneath these attributes and have attributes that are associated to them. They rank up and add to attributes. That doesn't sound anything crazy if you're a D&D individual. But what I did think was neat was that you have expertises. And expertises, which I'm guessing get filled into these blanks down here. There might be somewhere else on the character sheet where they go, but I think they get filled in there. But what I think expertises is neat is, no, it's a separate spot on your character sheet, is these are like specialized skills in essence. You can have different types of expertise. There's a cultural one, which is if you're an expert in a certain culture, you know their language, you know their customs. There's utility expertise, which is like trades and crafting. But then the cool one for me is armor and weapons. So you might have a light weapon and you might be skilled in light weapons, but that light weapon has a special attribute, right? Or like we'll use armor. So like chainmail on its own gives a penalty to speed, but it has a special ability that if you have expertise in it, then you don't incur that, right? Or if a hammer has an ability for a knockback, then you don't unlock it unless you have expertise in that hammer. And I thought that was kind of clever. And you get expertise based on, like, you get 2 at first level or something, and then you have extra for your intellect. So if you're smart, you get more expertise, which means you can unlock cooler stuff. So even a fighter might want to have, or a warrior, they call in this game, you might want to have some expertise in multiple weapons so you can switch it up, whatever. So I think that's kind of nice. What else are we going here? Class and professions. So classes, they call them paths. So you have paths, and there's a whole lot of paths here. I'm going to go ahead and grab these real quick. So here are the different sort of paths, and each path has, in essence, 3 tech trees, right? It's almost like a tech tree scenario. And what's neat about it is each path has a base ability. Oops. Each path has a base ability. And so when you take the path, you get that ability. And then if you take another level in that path, you get to choose which of these sort of tech trees to go down, and you can kind of mix and match and get what you want. Or you can choose another path, and there's no limit to the amount of paths you can start. So you can go all over the place. You could be a warrior, scholar, leader and not go into any of the techs. And that's fine, right? And you can do that. So I think that so far for me, what I'm picking up from this game is that I think there are some there's some innovative, like the plot die to me is kind of innovative, but the rest of what's sort of just nice is the organization. This is just really well organized at this point in time in terms of where are my skills, what do they relate to, what are my classes, where are all the abilities sort of packaged. There's just a lot of smooth organization, right? They call these specializations, by the way, underneath these sort of like tech things, right? Abilities are the different sort of powers within the special, they call them talents within the specializations. So that's where I'm a terrible speller, as you can see. So that's where you're going to get your different powers and abilities. And what you're going to find is that some of them, they have different types of, like, I'm going to pull up a picture. So here's an example of a scholar path. And so you automatically get this base picture. And this is from D4 D&D, the gentleman who has a YouTube channel that I sort of screenshotted this. And then these are the different specializations, and each specialization has different talents that you would get as you continue to level. And down here, there's a nice little key that shows you that certain talents are free in terms of, like, on your turn, they just happen. Certain ones take 1 action, certain ones take 2 actions, and it's a 3-action economy sort of system, which we would get into when we get into action economy. right? So nice, super, super simple, super smooth. I'm going to skip around because I don't know a ton about gear, except for that you get expertise in them. Talents and powers, I'm not going into a lot of details about those, but they're either going to use focus or investiture. It's going to be powered by these different pools of meta currency. Advancing, I don't know how you level yet, no idea. Initiative uses the Demon Lord initiative system, which there's some people that came into this. I've actually been calling it the Bruno system because that's who I heard it from first. Shout out to Bruno. Which is you have a fast turn, slow turn, and this is players, enemies, players, enemies. And so you have a choice. If you take a fast turn, that means you get 2 actions. If you take a slow turn, you get all 3 of your actions. And actions are pretty tight. So it's a question of, okay, do I want to get this action off as soon as possible and make sure that no bad guys do anything to my face? Or do I want to have a more nuanced thing that I want to do? So I'm going to take my time, right? Rounds and turns, as far as I know, that it's side-based. It's side-based initiative, but it's like all allies that go fast, you get choose who's going, right? So there's not really like a set turn in the order. Action economy, you have 3 actions that you can use on your turn. So what are all those actions? I've got a list here. First thing that is noted is that, here's my list. No action can be repeated. So that's how they kind of like, unlike Pathfinder, where you're going to get 3 attacks. You got 3 actions, you can take 3 attacks, and we got to figure out how to make each attack not powerful. This is, look, you can't repeat any of these actions. And so you have brace. You make it so that you have disadvantage, or enemies have disadvantage on their attack against you. You have disengage, which is you don't want an attack of opportunity against you. You have gain advantage, which was kind of interesting. It's like you use a skill check against the enemy, but then that gives you an advantage on your next skill test, but your next skill test can't be the same skill test you use to get the gain advantage. But remember that swinging your weapon, or heavy weapon or light weapon, is a skill test. So interact, you're going to do something in the room, right? Free, there's not a lot of whole ways to use free ones. Movement is an action, and you can't break up your movement around your stuff. Attacking. So there was an interesting concept of, if you do want to make a second attack and you have an offhand weapon, you can use focus to do so. So you can spend 2 focus and then you can swing. Use a skill. Grapple. Grapple takes 2 actions. Ready an action, which takes an action to do, and the other thing is, depending on what the other action is you're doing, ready action costs that many actions. So for instance, if I wanted to ready a grapple, I have to be taking a slow turn, because a ready grapple would take 3 actions, 1 for the ready and 2 for the grapple, right? If I'm trying to ready a strike, then I only need 2 actions to do that, right? 1 to strike and 1 to ready. So I could ready a strike if I go fast, and I could have that trigger for the DM as to what I want to do. But if I'm going to ready a grapple, I've got to be going slow, and I hope that the enemy's not going fast and running away from me, right? That kind of thing. Recovery is you gain, it costs 2 actions to do, and you get the benefit of a short rest. And then you can shove someone, which I believe just takes 1 action. Now that's what's going on. Now, what's interesting is, let's talk about focus a little bit more. And so first off, I like all these. Like, I like a lot of actions. When I was starting to build out my system, I was looking at Lancer, which has a ton of different ones. And I was looking at some other games to figure out what actions I liked. And so far, I think these are pretty clean. I think these are pretty simple and easy. Once again, I like simplicity, but it's still adding, when you have that sort of readied action and you have that initiative, I think it adds enough sort of interest in terms of decision-making and tactics, right? Now, you also have reactions. You get 1 reaction a round. And the first thing I want to say is they made aid a reaction. I love that, right? So helping in other games is your action. And that always felt like, it's like you have to prep for an action or something. In this game, they said, no, it's a reaction. You can, anytime anyone's making a skill check, you can help them. And attacks are skill checks. So if your buddy is attacking and you're like, I want to help so-and-so, it just costs you a focus, right? Once again, that focus resource is going to start draining during your combat. So using something like recovery to get focus back, it's going to be important. You can avoid danger as a reaction, which is in essence, you're trying to use your agility to dodge an attack. There was a point made by the D4 dude about this might slow down combat. Maybe, it might be super fast, right? It might be one of those things you just do it really quick. But what's really cool is you actually have to make your agility check against their attack value. So whatever they rolled. So if they rolled an 18, you're going to try and dodge that 18. And so it might be that what this does is that the GM has to always verbalize what was rolled. So they're gonna be like, he rolled a 10, or whatever the case is. And then, so is that gonna trigger that I'm gonna try and avoid that? Whereas dodge sounds like something you have to do in advance. It costs 1 focus and it makes it so they have disadvantage on their attack. And it's a reaction. So already we have disadvantage on attack, but I have to use my action to prepare for it, and disadvantage on attack, but I have to use my reaction to do it. So I like that. I like that you have 2 different ways to cause a disadvantage. They use 2 different action economies, right? And then reactive strike is I'm going to take an attack back at someone if they try and move away from me. That's a reaction, okay? So opportunity attack. So I like this. Attack mechanic, we've already kind of touched on this. It's you're taking a D20, you're rolling over. But what they do in this game, which is kind of cool, is so it's like, this would be D20 plus attribute, so we'll say strength, plus heavy, weapon, skill, right? So now you have your attack bonus, but you also roll the damage die simultaneously. And you're going to roll them both simultaneously because what happens is if you miss, you can opt to spend 1 focus to still do the damage of the die, right? And they call this a glancing blow. So what this means is that if I roll the D20 in the die, I'm going to now see if I hit. If I hit, I get to do the damage die plus my attribute bonus. So let's say I rolled a D8, I rolled a 4, and my attribute bonus is a 3. So if I hit, I do 7 damage. If I miss, I can say, you know what, I'm going to burn 1 focus, and I'm just going to do that 4 damage result of the D8, and we're just going to call it, right? Once again, I'm draining my focus, but I'm doing something. And I think this was another clever thing to me in terms of continuing to feel like you're getting progress and making a difference on the enemy, right? So I really enjoyed that. I think that's cool. Defense is the main things for defense are you have 3 defensive stats, and also armor is deflecting damage, means that it's a damage reduction. It's not adding to your stat. So whatever my defensive stat was, so up here you saw that it was 16. If I have full plate armor or shard plate, it's not going to go to like 21. It's going to stay at 16. It's just that if I take damage, I'm doing damage reduction, right? So armor just takes away damage reduction. And that's pretty much it. Let me see real quick. Let me glance over my notes to see if there was anything else that I have not talked about. I guess conditions. The only things, so I don't know all the conditions that people have, but there are injuries. And injuries are I thought this was cool. This goes into death and dying. If you ever get knocked out, if you ever get taken to 0, you then roll for an injury. Okay? Now, you roll a d20, and the higher you get, the less serious it is. And so, in essence, maybe the top half, I have no idea what the chart looks like, and I have no idea what you talk about with your DM. But let's say that the top half of that is just generic injury, right? So it's just like a scratch or scrape or whatever. But these generic injuries count towards -5 for subsequent knockout rolls. So next time you get knocked out, if that injury is still there, if it's lingering, then what happens, you roll that d20 and you get -5 to it. Now, the other thing is you get a bunch of pluses to this. It's like when you roll it, you get plus for some sort of ability or attribute, or maybe it's your strength, maybe, who knows. But you're going to get all these different pluses to the roll. But then eventually, as you get more and more injuries, you're going to get minuses to those rolls. And serious injuries are then going to have penalties in-game plus minus something, right? So now you're going to eventually start to get these serious injuries that start giving you minus to your skill checks, minus to whatever, and you're still getting these -5s. And eventually, what this is culminating in is if there's ever a chance that you roll a injury check and the result is less than -6, sorry, is -6 or less, then you're dead. And I don't think there's a lot of ways that you can come back from that. I think that that's sort of it. Sorry. And then finally, rest mechanic, you have if you take like a short rest, you have a recovery die. And I think the recovery die is somewhere along the lines of your, like, it's determined by your willpower in some way. I didn't see that one. On this character sheet I'm seeing, there's a recovery die of a D8, and I don't know what determined that necessarily. But whatever your recovery die is, you roll it, and the result you can split up in hit points and focus. So if I've got a D8 and I roll an 8, I can say, oh, I'm going to get 4 focus back and 4 hit points, right? This is like a short rest, right? And this is in essence what I believe you're doing when you do a rally, when you do a recover action. You can only do it once every scene, but that's, you obviously roll your D8 and you get that much focus or hit points back, which you can get a lot of freaking focus and hit points back. And the fact that you can do that once a scene, once a combat, now granted you're taking 2 actions to do it, but that's pretty crazy. So it's like if you did a slow turn, 2 actions to roll that die, you get like an 8, you get 8 focus back, and now you're going, and then you get back into the fight. That's pretty cool. All right, full rest is going to be, you just fill everything up. Full everything, right? That sort of thing. Action pools, we already know about this. This is your hit points, focus, and investiture. So that's pretty much it. And then our death and dying thing was up here, right? I'd clean that up and sort of how it looks. So that's the mechanics that I know of thus far. And once again, like I said, I think that it's just clean. I think that there's a couple things in here that to me are like, oh, that's a great idea. Like, I think glancing, like, now I'm a tactical combat kind of person, so I like that. So I think that the plot die is clever, and I think the glancing blow is very clever. And besides that, and I think everything you do with focus is pretty damn clever. Besides that, I think everything is just nice and clean. I think everything is very organized and very smooth and very intuitive. So that's going to really lend itself to all these Cosmere worlds where it's like every world is going to be very different with a very different magic system, but it's all going to be able to fit right on top of this nicely. All right, that's the video. Hit subscribe, hit the bell, leave some comments. What are your thoughts? Are you excited about this game? And I'll talk to you guys soon.